Hi friends! Welcome back to my channel! So today we are going to talk about a very big subject, which is queer coding. Pop culture gal! That's me! I'm pop culture gal. What's queer coding, you ask? Well, let me explain. Queer coding is actually coding a character as queer without explicitly stating that he's queer. Now, you're like, why are you talking about that? Is anything wrong with this? Well, let me take you first through the history of queer coding. Queer coding was born years and years ago in the US because at that time the US had a strong censorship going with queer characters. It was forbidden to portray queer characters explicitly on screen. So people would actually queer code their character. They would use characteristics which the public would absolutely recognize as queer without explicitly stating that the characters were queer. But because it was in the 60s and it was years ago, every queer character was a bad guy or had an awful life or would end up dying, and they were a comic relief, and it was very homophobic. So because of this censorship, they couldn't explicitly say that they were queer, but everybody understood that they were queer. And this is the origin of queer coding. Queer coding was used in this censorship era to produce homophobic content without stating it as, queer characters. So the history of queer coding is very homophobic. But it keeps going. Like today, people use queer coding to have characters that would appear queer and so appeal to a new public, to a queer audience, people who want diversity, queer people, LGBTQ plus people who will be like happy to recognize themselves in a character, but they won't explicitly state it, so they will keep also the homophobic audience, like, yay, you feed both sides. But the part where it's absolutely wrong is that actually queer coding is often used for the villains in the story. One big user of queer coding is actually Disney. Yeah, I know, but I'm gonna put a lot of examples here all around me, so you will see all these characters that are very explicit, like very queer coded. Like you see them and it's always, and queer coding actually uses a lot of cliche. Like if it's a male character, you will code him as, this very effeminated character. If it's a female character, she will like lure the pure and happy and lovely woman hero, and she will make her turn bad, and she will be evil, and she will be like, or she will have a drag queen. Like Ursula, for example, is actually inspired by a real life drag queen, but she's the villain of the story. That is what is absolutely wrong with queer coding. It's because it's always the villains that are queer coded. Like nobody explicitly states that they are actually queer, but they use all the characteristics that have been associated with queer communities and they use them on these characters. Like if you queer code but you queer code everyone and you don't have actually something in the back of your mind, like the history of queer coding is deeply homophobic, but the usage of it still is. Because you only queer code villains. So what do you say? What do you say to young children watching cartoons and when all the villains are queer coded? You tell them this is wrong. Not only this is wrong because it's not the norm and it doesn't belong, like the good characters and the heroes, they are not this, they are very straight, very normal. But like the bad guy that they are fighting, they're very heavily queer coded. So all these character traits that you took from the queer community, you put them in this cultural content and you tell people watching them this is wrong, these characteristics are wrong for these characters. And you use it and you turn it as a bad thing. So it's awful actually. The use of queer content and it's still going on, And it's like it's not made explicit, because if it's explicit you can't deny that it's fucking homophobic. We need more diversity and we need you to be able to tell people that they can be proud of themselves, and queer coding is absolutely not fucking helping. Queer coding is an awful thing. It's still going on today, which is absolutely weird. Like, why would you keep doing that? There's a lot of wrong things about it. First of all, it's rooted in a deeply homophobic history, but as it keeps going, it keeps sending this message that queer characters are not valuable enough to actually exist explicitly, that their identity are not worth the openness and the truth of being, you know, explicitly stated on screen. Like their identity should be hidden because you only use queer coding but you don't officially, you know, state them as queer. It's like sending the message that their identity should stay hidden because they have all the characteristics that are used in the queer community, that are used to describe the queer community, but they are not explicitly queer. So not only are there qualities that you deem bad in your representation, but also that you deem that should stay a secret because none of them is explicitly queer. Like, you can have queer villains, of course you can. It's a bit weird if all your villains, like it's only villains that are queer, none of the heroes. But like you can have queer villains. But like actually the queer coding is very insidious. It's like this characteristic, like their identity is not worth being outside and proud. You can be proud of that and it's bad. So stop this shit. So yeah, now if you didn't know what queer coding was before, now you do, and now you know how wrong it is. A big example of queer coding was the last Beauty and the Beast movie, when, you know, there was all this talk about a queer character in the movie. I didn't see one. Nobody was explicitly queer, and it was so small that they actually cut the scene so it could go to China because it was not explicit and not relevant to the plot. And it was part of the bad guys, actually. I think it was a man who suddenly was dressed as a woman, like he was attacked by a furniture, and he was dressed up and he was like enjoying wearing a dress, which is queer coding, but like he was a bad guy and so he was shown as, you know, humoristic and wrong. Like, men can wear dresses if they want, who cares? And it was a big jab at the queer community and you know, making it like this comic relief moment and very funny and like, a dash of diversity for you peasants. But so it's very, very harmful trope actually, and queer coding is still very present, but it's still very wrong. So do not do it, kids. Do not queer code. So yeah, that was it for today's talk about queer coding. And thank you for watching. Bye!